In tonight's video, we're going to talk about how to write and apply function rules. So in order to write function rules, we have a couple of steps. Step number 1 is determine a way to get from the first x value to the first y value. So in our charts, we're looking at how to get from x to y. Step 2, check to see if it applies to the second and third values. If your initial idea doesn't work for the second and third values, try again. And then step 3 is to write a function rule based on that change. So if you kind of look at our first example here, I start with my first value, 1, and I think of ways to get from 1 to 5. So if I multiply x by 5, I can get the y. 1 times 5 is 5. But if I test that for my second, 2 times 5 is 10. It's not 6. So my first idea didn't work. Cross that out, move on to the next one. All right, another way I could get from 1 to 5 would be to add 4. So 2 plus 4 is 6. It works for the second value. 3 plus 4 is 7. It works for the third value. So since it worked for these two, I can go ahead and write my function rule, f of x equals x plus 4. Some helpful hints. Make a list of all the rules that you try. Cross out the ones that don't work instead of erasing them. This will keep you from trying the same rules over and over. And the other hint, pick an easy x value to work with. It doesn't necessarily have to be the first value in the table. 0, 1, or negative 1 usually make good candidates if they're provided for you. So let's take a look at these 4 examples. So I'm going to start with the first one. Okay. Now I like working with 1. It's a positive number and it's a really easy number to work with. So I'm going to think about ways that I can get from 1 to 2. So how can I go from 1 to 2? Well, one way is by adding 1. So I'm going to write down add 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. Now 2 plus 1 is 3, not 4. So that add 1 doesn't work. Another way I could get from 1 to 2 is I could multiply by 2. 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 0 times 2 is 0, negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. So that's the one that's going to work. I'm going to translate that into a function rule. F of x is equal to, or y is equal to, 2 times x. Notice the coefficient goes out in front of the variable, not the other way around. So we would not write f of x equals x2. This is not proper math grammar, and therefore it's not what we want to use. Okay, this one would be your best answer. All right, number 2. Again, I don't have a 1 this time, but I like to use my smallest positive number if possible, so I'm going to try working with 3. So what's one way to get from 3 to negative 6? Well, I could subtract 9. 6 minus 9 is negative 3, though. It's not 12, so that doesn't work. Another thing I could do is I could multiply by negative 2. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. 6 times negative 2 is negative 12. 0 times negative 2 is 0. And negative 3 times negative 2 is 6. So that's my choice.
Maggie Brown, please come to the front office.
Okay.
Maggie Brown,
Next,
please come to the front office.
I'm going to change that into my function rule. F of x is equal to negative 2 times x, negative 2x. And again, the coefficient goes out in front, and the variable goes second. Right, next example, I'm trying to get from x to f of x, or from x to y. And I'm going to start with, I don't have any positive values, and I don't have any low numbers. So I'm going to think of ways I can get, I'm going to try this negative 2 to negative 3. To me, that seems like the easiest numbers to work with. So how do I get from negative 2 to negative 3? Well, I could subtract 1. So negative 2 minus 1 is negative 3. Negative 4 minus 1 is negative 5, not negative 7, so that didn't work. There's nothing obvious I can multiply 2 by to get negative 3, so it's probably not going to be multiplication. In this instance, it's probably going to take 2 steps. So I'm going to have to multiply by something and then add or subtract something. So let's look at this. If I look at the 0, this kind of gives me a hint about what I might have to add. Whatever number is here when you're multiplying by 0 is going to be what you add at the end. So here I'm going to be adding 1. All right, so I know I have to add 1 at the end. So then I just need to figure out what I need to multiply negative 2 by. So I would multiply negative 2 by 2 and then add 1 to get negative 3. So we're going to think multiply by 2 and then add 1. And we're going to test that for all the other ones. So negative 4 times 2 is negative 8, plus 1 is negative 7. Negative 6 times 2 is negative 12, plus 1 is negative 11, and that works. So write my function rule, f of x is equal to 2x plus 1. All right, last example on this side. I need to figure out how to get from x to y, and I like to use positive numbers. They make more sense in my brain, so I'm going to work with 4. So how can I get from 4 to negative 10? Well, I could subtract 14, but 5 minus 14 is not negative 14. 5 minus 14 would be a negative 9. So that's not going to work. There's nothing obvious to multiply 4 by to get to negative 10, so probably going to be 2 steps. I'm going to look at this row right here where I have 0, and I have a 6 as my output or my y value, so I know at the end I'm going to have to add 6. That works because anything times 0 is 0, and then you would add this bit left over, so we're going to be adding 6. Alright, so then if I go back to my 4, I need to figure out what times 4 plus 6 is going to give me negative 10. And I do believe that's going to be a negative 4. So we're multiplying by a negative 4, and then we're adding 6. 4 times negative 4 is negative 16. Negative 16 plus 6 is negative 10. 5 times negative 4 is negative 20. Plus 6 is negative 14. That one works. Negative 2 times negative 4 is 8. 8 plus 6 is 14. So it works for that one as well. So my function rule would be f of x is equal to negative 4x plus 6. All right, turning the page over, we're going to talk about now how to apply these function rules that we've written. So step 1, we write the function rule for the sequence given, and then we use the given domain to find the missing piece in the sequence. So you'll usually have a question mark here, and that's what you're looking for. So we substitute the x value in, and then we evaluate. So the function rule for this table is f of x equals x minus 2. From every x value, I would subtract 2, and that gives me the y values. In order to find f of 3, I plug in 3. So f of 3 is equal to 3 minus 2. So f of 3 is equal to 1. All right, 3 more examples. You may want to double check your chart. My copies didn't really come out very well on this, so make sure you know what all these values are. It'll make the problem make a little bit more sense. Alright, so my first job is to write the function rule. How do I get from x to y? I like this one. It gives me a positive 1 to work with. So what's one way I can get from 1 to 10? Well, obviously I could add 9. That's pretty straightforward. If I test 2 plus 9, though, I don't get 14, so that's not going to work. The next obvious choice is I can multiply by 10. But 2 times 10 is 20, not 14. So that one's not going to work. So therefore, this is going to be a 2-step problem. Alright, so I go and I find 0. I have a 6 here, so I know I'm going to have to add 6 as my second step. Alright, go back and look at 1. What do I multiply 1 by and then add 6 to get 10? Well, I'd have to multiply 1 by 4. So if I multiply by 4 and then add 6, 1 times 4 is 4. 4 plus 6 is 10. So my function rule is going to be f of x is equal to 4x plus 6. Then I need to use that function rule to test, I guess, to make sure it's right. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 plus 6 is 14. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. And negative 8 plus 6 is negative 2. So that's correct. Then I'm going to use my domain of negative 1, and I'm going to evaluate f of negative 1. So 4 times negative 1 plus 6. 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. And negative 4 plus 6 is 2. So f of negative 1 is equal to 2. And there we go. Now you can see it. Alright, next example. First step, I have to write my function rule, and this one's nice as well. It gives me 1. So what are ways to get from 1 to negative 5? Well, I could subtract 6. 2 minus 6, though, is negative 4, not negative 3. So that's a bust. Alright, we're going to multiply by negative 5 would be my next obvious choice. 2 times negative 5 is negative 10, so that also doesn't work. meaning this is probably going to be a two-step problem. So this one's again nice because it gives me 0 and I have a minus 7 there. So I know my second step is I'm going to have to subtract 7. All right, going back to the 5, I'd have to multiply 1 by 2 and then subtract 7 to get negative 5. So we're going to multiply by 2 and then subtract 7. 1 times 2 again is 2, minus 7 is negative 5. 2 times 2 is 4, minus 7 is negative 3. 2 times 3 is 6, minus 7 is negative 1. So that rule works. Of x equals 2x minus 7. And then I'm trying to find f of 4. So f of 4 is equal to 2 times 4 minus 7. So f of 4 is equal to 8 minus 7. So f of 4 is equal to 1. Okay. Last example for today. I got to first write my function rule. How do I get from 1 to 8? Choices. I could add 7. Testing that though, 3 plus 7 is not 18, it's 10, so no good. I could multiply by 8. 3 times 8 is 24, not 18. That's no good, so we're looking at a two-stepper. Find my 0. So it's going to be something and then add 3 to get a positive 3 there. Alright, so I'm going to have to multiply by 5 and then add 3 to get from 1 to 8. Alright, test that on a couple. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 3 is 18. 5 times 4 is 20, plus 3 is 23, so that's the one I'm going to use. So f of x is equal to 5x plus 3. Then I'm looking for f of 2. So 5 times 2 plus 3. F of 2 is equal to 10 plus 3. And f of 2 is equal to 13. That's my final answer.